Republican
Hello, YouTube family. Happy Monday. I was talking again and my mic was off, but thank you so much for joining me this Monday night. We are going to be picking up where we left off yesterday. It is the Medicaid fraud hearing having to do with the state of Ohio. Brandon Gill of Texas is hosting the committee. So let's get started where we left off. And as always, I'm Mrs. Dave the lawyer. If you see me moving around, it's because I'm here getting my steps in while I live stream. I have my little walking pad underneath here. So thanks for joining me while I get my steps in. And if you see me on my phone, I'm not texting anybody. I'm actually in the live chat. So feel free to comment and chat. I'll be chatting here with you. And let's get started.
Majority has continuously showed how out of touch they are. They've prioritized handouts to the wealthy and the well-connected on the backs of hardworking, everyday Ohioans. At the top of the list is the largest public corruption case in Ohio history, House Bill 6, a $61 million dark money bribery and racketeering scandal that put former Republican Speaker of the House in federal prison for 20 years. The administration has refused to pay nursing homes almost $1 billion in back pay, despite being ordered to do so by the Ohio Supreme Court. Given $1.6 billion in tax breaks, $1.4 billion more than the administration calculated, to the wealthy tech corporations to build data centers that place heavy resource burdens on local communities. Exhibit A, Republicans' one-party veto-proof rule has controlled the state for the last 15 consecutive years. They hold the House, the Senate, the governor's office, and 4 statewide offices. If there is fraud in Medicaid, it has happened on the Republican majority's watch. Perhaps it's time to clean Ohio's house. Recently, Senator Ernst opined, government employees are caught with their hands in the cookie jar, abusing their positions for personal gain. Well, Ohio Republicans appear to be emulating the playbook of the White House. The President of the United States is fleecing taxpayers across the country to fight endless wars, attempting to bankroll numerous vanity projects, and tried to stick his hand in a cookie jar, a $1.8 billion cookie jar made especially for January 6 insurgents. With an unpopular Republican gubernatorial candidate in Ohio and even more out-of-touch policies, I am not surprised that we suddenly have a call for fraud reform in Ohio, Medicaid. If there is fraud, we should root it out and remedy the situation. I'm surprised that somehow the Republicans think they're not responsible, as the supervision of the Department of Medicaid has happened on their watch. I applaud the goal of this task force, which was described, and I quote, going after institutions that stop fearing accountability and abuse the American people. We should absolutely be doing everything we can to expose and prevent fraud, use new technologies to provide oversight and accountability. These are not and should not be partisan, but should be a welcome part of any system that serves the people. Members of my caucus and I are ready to work with everyone to tackle issues of fraud, especially the abuse of taxpayer dollars, which is in essence abuse of the American people. We must maintain fiscal responsibility while ensuring that Medicaid is available to those eligible, people who are age, blind, disabled, children, and families in need. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I will do my best to answer your questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record. Is that okay?
Without objection.
Thank you. I would like to enter into the record an article February 4th, 2026 from NBC entitled, Immigrants Contributed Trillions of Dollars More in Taxes Than They Received in Benefits.
Yep. Without objection.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter some items into the record.
Go for it.
The first one is an article titled Daily Wire Investigation Reveals One of the Biggest Government Waste Scandals Hiding in Plain Sight.
Without objection.
The second is Inside Ohio's Home Health Empire, 7 buildings, 288 Medicaid companies, $250 million.
Without objection.
The third is Meet the Convicted Fraudster Running a $1 million Medicaid Business.
Without objection.
The fourth is he was convicted for defrauding the government. Now Medicaid pays his wife millions.
Without objection.
The fifth is refugees from Bhutan build Medicaid millions. Now they drink champagne in private jets.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I ask to enter into unanimous consent.
Okay.
I would ask to enter into a record from May 20th, 2026, an article from Cleveland.com entitled, Ohio Republicans are rage baiting over Medicaid fraud, but they've run the program since 2011.
Without objection. All right. Well, thank you again to the witnesses for taking the time to be here. We certainly appreciate your time and your testimonies. And now we're moving on to the question portion of the hearing. Without further ado, I'd like to recognize Chairman Comer for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for leading this, what I think is going to be a very effective task force for the frustrated American taxpayers. Mr. Rosiak, your reporting highlights what seems to be the same problems that we saw in Minnesota and California. Fraudsters claiming Medicaid reimbursement for services that they never provided. Allegations of racism against anyone looking into the fraud, and state enforcement officials not doing their part in flagging rapid, unexplained growth. During your investigation in Ohio, what raised your suspicions that these providers were committing fraud?
Well, the first thing is that it wasn't their full-time job. Most Americans, I think if you're making $1 million a month, you at least have to show up. It's not part-time. But they're oftentimes working in trucking, they're working in nonprofit activism and things like that. And there was also just nobody in these buildings. You would walk down the hall and there's literally just dozens of buildings. There's stray cats living like in the parking lot because nobody ever comes here. There's like smoke alarms, batteries chirping because nobody's there. It was a very creepy thing and it didn't seem normal at all.
The same thing we saw in Minnesota. How many providers did you see located at the same address? And why is that a red flag for fraud?
Well, in one building, we saw 94 companies. There's one landlord that
How many?
owns 94.
In one address? Mm-hmm. Wow. You would think a state employee would catch that. I mean, that's part of the problem, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, with Medicaid is it's overwhelmingly federal dollars, but it's administered by the states. So the states aren't as concerned because it's federal money. It's not their money, and it's just that's a joke, and I'm glad we're doing something about it. I'm glad the Vice President's interested in it. This committee's interested in it. Mr. Rosiak, did you see any other signs that services were not being provided, like abandoned office space?
Yes, I saw an office space that was totally abandoned. I saw offices that had signs that said, "We've just stepped out to lunch," but it was clear that was an attempt to deceive because there was, for example, stacks of mail piled up at the door, sometimes postmarked months ago.
You also reported companies with rapid and unusual growth. Should state oversight authorities have been alarmed by these trends?
Yes. I mean, for example, there was a janitor who renamed her LLC to be Mental Health and started billing Medicaid $100,000 in the first month, later up to $650,000 in 1 month, and then she left the country. And so if you were to start a roofing business, it takes time to build clients. How do you get $100,000 in business the first month? That's something people could ask.
Well, I really appreciate your investigative work. You are curious. And that's what a journalist is supposed to be. But unfortunately, a lot of the journalists today aren't curious when it comes to fraud and abuse of taxpayer dollars. So thank you for your great work. Auditor Faber, you've been investigating Medicaid fraud in Ohio for years. It sounds like the recent reporting is not the first time that you've tried to bring these issues to the public's attention. What's going on in Ohio with these waiver programs, and why are they so susceptible to fraud? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman, the short answer is that whenever we have a big government program, we essentially historically have predicated these on this trust concept. You sign up, you say you're eligible, we'll believe you. But the backside of that is we need to be less trusting and more verifying. Absolutely. And so we started identifying in 2019 weaknesses in the program where we were seeing systemic failures in the verification side. And we have now issued a number, 5, 6, 7 reports where we keep identifying that you're not going out and checking to see that the people who you've got on the program are truly eligible and truly beneficiaries. You know, in the office, what we always say, we look for control weaknesses. I don't go out and look to see whether Joe Smith is supposed to be on Medicaid or not. That is the department's responsibility. It's the agency's responsibility to do those verifications. And what we find is historically, these verification programs are just not robust and aren't being done efficiently.
And that's one of the things that we were hoping would happen with the states with the Big Beautiful Bill, that they get, I'll use Kentucky as an example, my own state. Once you're on Medicaid, you're pretty much on Medicaid forever. And Medicaid was created to be a temporary safety net program. And what's happened, especially in the states that have expanded Medicaid, is it's become an entitlement. And there's no accountability with respect to all these new programs. Anytime there's autism, if there's more money for autism, it seems like the number of people that are declared autistic skyrockets. If anytime there's money put in for mental health, that you just have all these providers that show up and all these people that supposedly are receiving mental health services, and no one really knows that much about it. So I appreciate the work that you two have done. Again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership on this issue. And before I yield, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the Oversight Committee staff report, and I encourage everyone to read it, The Cost of Doing Nothing, How Tim Walsh and Keith Ellison Fueled Minnesota's Fraud Explosion.
Without objection.
Thank you.
So I do want to comment because, as I shared with you guys before, my background is in mental health. I have a master's in psychology, and my former career was a master's level clinician or a therapist. And I feel like when they're bringing up mental health, like, this is kind of a slippery slope. So he just made the statement that if they give more money for autism now, they're seeing, you know, an influx of people with autism. But it's kind of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, we don't really know in that scenario. Like, are you seeing more people with autism because that program wasn't around, so people with autism couldn't get those benefits? Or are people just taking advantage of the system? We don't know that because these programs don't put safeguards in place and nobody's really auditing it properly. In my opinion, it should be really easy to determine that and to audit it, because as therapists and providers, you're required to keep very, very, very detailed case notes. So you should be able to look in somebody's chart or do an audit, or maybe, I'm sure they do this already, but have somebody sign like a HIPAA authorization form if they're going to receive these benefits, that an audit is allowed to be done on their past history. And then you could see what the background is. You know, have they had these symptoms? Were they getting treatment for this before, to determine whether the diagnosis is legitimate or not. So there's a lot that can be done to fix these problems, but I don't know if they're going to put those safeguards in place. That's what should be done. But I think this is where the left and the right seem to butt heads, because the left just wants more money and keeps pleading that these people are poor, these people are mentally ill, they need all these benefits. Okay, and maybe that is true. But what the right does is says, no, look, this group of people committed all this fraud, so we need to take away this money because look at how much is being used fraudulently. Personally, I'm more in the middle when it comes to this type of stuff. I think people that truly need these benefits are not able to get these benefits because there's so many people committing fraud. So I don't think we should necessarily, yank the rug out and defund these programs. I think we should keep the programs active, keep the same amount of money in these programs, but put in better safety rails so people that actually need these treatments actually get them. But that's just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask to enter into the record unanimous consent. Thank you. I would ask to enter into the record April 21st, 2026, a report from Protect Our Care entitled The Real Fraud. Trump pardoned the nation's biggest healthcare fraudsters, which describes how President Trump pardoned over $2 billion in fraud.
Without objection?
Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you, and we'll turn it back over to you. And I now recognize Ranking Member Simon for her 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've learned a lot from our witnesses today, so again, want to thank you for traveling all this way. Democrats do believe, as do our colleagues across the aisle, that it is critically important to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse so that the taxpayer dollars actually help real people and communities that they were intended to help. Those found guilty of fraud should be held accountable. That is without question. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle say that their pursuit of fraud is to strengthen the federal programs that struggling Americans turn to for help. But it is beyond clear that that is not the truth. Republicans' signature law, the One Big Beautiful Bill, cut more than $1 trillion from Medicaid, SNAP, which feeds hungry Americans, children's health insurance programs, and other programs that help folks meet their very basic needs, the most low income among us, while this affordability crisis is drowning our people across the country. In Ohio, more than 450,000 people are expected to lose their health insurance coverage by 2034 due to the One Big Beautiful Bill, so that Republicans can instead provide tax cuts for the wealthiest among us. This question is for Mr. Faber. Do you agree with my colleagues in the Republican Party and their decision to rip health insurance away from over 450,000 Ohioans?
Okay, so I have to comment on this. She's talking about the Big Beautiful Bill, and one thing that she failed to comment about that has to do with the Big Beautiful Bill is, if you guys remember, back in, I think it was October, November, the government was shut down. And one of the reasons that they were shut down was because Democrats were rallying that we extend the American Rescue Act. And what the American Rescue Act was a bill that was enacted during COVID lockdowns, which allowed people to get higher subsidies for the ACA Marketplace Obamacare plan. So they got higher subsidies, more what's called a cost-sharing reduction, which overall reduced the amount that they were paying monthly, reduced their out-of-pocket max, and reduced their copays. Well, here's the thing. So the American Rescue Act was created to be temporary. It was to help subsidize Americans that couldn't work because of the COVID lockdowns. And it wasn't supposed to be a forever type of subsidization. I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm not even going to attempt it. But it was only supposed to be temporary to help people out because they weren't able to work. And I think, and I saw this firsthand because I have an insurance agency also. So this was like a crazy open enrollment, but that's another story altogether. I don't think insurance carriers anticipated that the American Rescue Act was not going to be extended. I really think that they thought that Congress was going to extend it and people would be able to keep their subsidies and keep their cost-sharing reductions, but that didn't happen. And as a result, it's not that a lot of Americans lost their coverage. They could keep their coverage. They had a choice. But a lot of Americans saw their premiums just skyrocket. Like, I'm not just talking about going up $100. I'm talking about in some scenarios, seeing it go up 200%, 1,000%, or somebody used to like a zero premium payment, now would have to pay $400 or $600 a month for the exact same insurance. And also we saw the deductibles become higher and the max out of pocket go to like $10,600. So I wish that they would be honest, because like I said, it's not that anybody lost their benefits. They didn't lose their benefits. They could keep their benefits. They just lost or they reduced their subsidy. What I saw is that a lot of people left the marketplace and went on to purchase private plans, because the private plans were more competitively priced, had lower deductibles, were nationwide PPOs. So that was the trend that I saw. Or I think some people just went without insurance. They just really couldn't afford, a much higher premium. And for somebody that's pretty healthy, it just didn't make sense for them to have it. So I just want to set the record straight that people didn't lose their insurance. They had a choice. They could keep their insurance. They could keep the insurance that they had. They could switch to a different plan. They could even switch to a private plan if they wanted to. They did have a choice. But what went away were those temporary subsidies that were never supposed to be forever. And the thing that nobody is addressing here that really kind of bothers me is that the Affordable Care Act is really anything but affordable. It's almost like the opposite. It's not affordable. For somebody that's not getting a hefty subsidy, the plans on the marketplace are very expensive, have very high deductibles, very high max out of pockets. And for people that are healthy or a family that's healthy, it just really doesn't make sense for them to be on these plans. And I'll give you guys an example. Like, I had one client, it was a family of 3 in Georgia, and we were looking for, I think we were just looking for, a PPO. No, I don't even think it was a PPO. We were just looking for a gold plan for them with a low deductible. We saw a Cigna HMO plan with a $2,000 deductible, and that plan for 3 people would have been over $6,000 a month. I mean, that's crazy. Like, who can afford to pay that much? Or I had a family in Florida. It's a husband and wife. They're in their mid-40s, and they have 4 kids. And they actually qualified for a subsidy. They're making 6 figures, but they still qualified for a subsidy with a household of 6. But the plan was over $9,000 a month. $9,000 a month, and I think their subsidy was like $1,800, but still in all, like, who can afford to pay $7,000 a month just for health insurance? And they still had a deductible, a max out of pocket, that they would have to pay thousands before anything was covered 100%. But my question is why are state regulators allowing insurance companies to charge people $9,000 a month for health insurance? That seems rather egregious, that a family of 6 would have to pay over 6 figures a year before their health insurance covers them. Like, that just seems very egregious, and I'm really disappointed in our state legislatures for allowing these crazy plans to be approved, because I don't think that's helpful for anyone. But let's continue.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, to the representative, I'm not sure that the auditor's position is relevant in that analysis, and I'm not sure that that analysis is one that I would agree with. What I would say with regard to the question that you're identifying is whether or not we are looking at fraud or waste and abuse, I think it's important to distinguish the two. As a prosecutor, somebody who has a criminal prosecution division, for us, fraud is a very legal determination.
Absolutely.
Waste and abuse is a broader question.
Thank you.
And to the extent that we can do
gonna move
things
on.
cooperatively to eliminate waste and abuse, I think we can save an awful lot of money in the system to provide more benefits for more Ohioans and more Americans.
Sir, thank you so much for your answer. And I think it is worth noting that yourself and other members of the majority, including the governor, have a responsibility to oversee this program, identify waste, fraud, and abuse, and provide opportunities not only just to identify, but to weed them out and create a stronger system where folks aren't able to defraud the system so easily. That seems like that's the problem that we should be talking about. How and why did this happen? Not just the folks who committed the fraud.
I
Why was
agree.
it so easy?
Totally
I have
agree with
another
her.
question for Representative Davila. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you have it, just
Okay.
like vanilla.
Vanilla. People
And just as
pronounce my
boring,
name
I
all
can
the
assure you.
time, so I always ask. Do you agree with the decision to rip away health insurance from an additional 450,000 Ohioans?
Mr. Chairman, to the member, I don't think that's an accurate characterization. And again,
Well, that's helpful. That's helpful to know. I'm going to move on, actually.
Oh my gosh,
I want to
that's
make
so
clear
misleading.
why
That's
we're
exactly what I'm
asking these
talking about.
questions is we're trying to, too, get to the bottom of the issue. The Republican candidate for the Ohio governorship has called Medicare and Medicaid mistakes and, quote, particularly Medicaid, the very program Republicans are supposedly be here talking about serving and saving today. Senator, I have a question for you, Senator Antonio. Are Medicare and Medicaid mistakes?
Absolutely not. Medicare and Medicaid protect thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in our country and provide them with the health care so they can stay healthier. And actually, in the long run, it's cost effective.
And that's including disabled children who are bound to their beds and bound to their homes. That's including Senator elders who are on literally their last years. That includes folks in deep hospice care are supported by these programs. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely.
Across all faiths, races, across all parts of Ohio, folks who need these services are granted support from Medicaid and Medicare. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
There are about 120,000 Ohioans who depend on the Medicaid waiver each year. The home and community-based health services waivers allow seniors, our elders, with the opportunity to live with dignity. That's also including folks with disabilities. I'm so thankful for this opportunity to discuss these incredibly important programs and how Ohio can do a better job at securing these programs so that people who really need them can get them. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Simon. And would now like to move on for recognize Mr. Jordan for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rosiak, who's Ishmael Muhammad?
Ismail Muhammad is a state legislator.
State representative in Ohio,
Correct.
currently serving, right? And is he Somali American descent?
Yes,
He is. Okay, do you know what his, in addition to serving in the legislature, what's his profession? Do you know?
a lawyer.
He's a lawyer. You happen to know where his law office is?
Yeah, when I was going through these buildings that were entirely populated by home health care firms, I noticed one thing, one business. I turned to my colleague and I said, we finally found something that isn't a home health care business. It's a law office. And we didn't think anything of it. I later learned that was the Ismail Law Office, which is also the campaign headquarters.
Somali American state representative. His law office is 1395, I think 1395 East Dublin Granville Road. And in that same facility, there are 35 of these, what would you call them, $2 million side hustle businesses, right? Where they're ripping off the tax. 35 in that. Do you happen to know if Mr. Mohammed was the lawyer who helped set up these LLCs who were ripping off the taxpayers of the country in the state of Ohio?
I don't know.
Don't know? Probably a fair question to explore. Maybe that's the next thing you can dig into. Find out if he was actually setting these organizations up, right? Right across the hall. We'll create this organization. Do you know if any of these organizations gave campaign contributions to Mr. Mohammed?
I didn't look specifically. I wrote about another candidate that owned a home health care business and ran for office, and his campaign was funded largely by fellow home health care owners.
Well, and that guy gave contributions to Mr. Mohammed too, right? The guy you looked into who got campaign contributions from these LLCs, 35 of them in the same building where the state rep has his law office. That guy you just talked gave contributions to to Ishmael Muhammad, but we did look it up, and he received thousands of dollars from these companies in his building that he may or may not have set up, but you're going to check that out as a good journalist, right? You're going to find out if that's the case. Wow, that's amazing. Because we got the chart from the state senator who says Republicans, it's all Republicans, even though they've indicted, I think, 153 indictments, 110 convictions, but somehow it's the Republicans' fault. Oh, but I forgot to ask this question. Was Mr. Muhammad, Ishmael Muhammad, in the General Assembly, whose law office is at the same facility where there are 35 of these HCBS, home community-based services providers, ripping off the taxpayers, is he a Republican or Democrat?
He's a Democrat, and like many of the home health care operators, he also had tax debts when I looked him up. And he also had created a company called the Chiropractic Center, some sort of medical office or another that was apparently running, I guess, out of his law office.
But it's funny because the good senator from Ohio who has the R's for, the red R's there on her chart didn't seem to want to mention Mr. Muhammad, who's right in the middle of this. Literally, his office is right in the middle of it. But no, he didn't. No way Democrats are involved. Here's the pattern I see. And the chairman of the full committee kind of pointed this out. The similarities between Minnesota and, well, first let me ask you this question. Did anyone call you a racist for trying to just uncover what's happening to millions, frankly, as the auditor said, billions of dollars of taxpayer money? Did you get called that?
Yeah, so half of Ohio's budget roughly spent on Medicaid, and that's doubled in the last few years. I tried to ask one healthcare owner, and I have his exact quote in response. Blah, blah, blah. Who cares? You don't pay my bills. I'm just going to tell everybody you're racist.
Yeah, that's what always happens. That's how the left operates. I always point out the left has a template. The left will tell a lie. We're actually providing services to elderly Ohioans going into the left will tell a lie. Big media will report, oh, this is wonderful. Big tech will amplify the lie. You tell the truth, they call you racist. It's happened in Minnesota. This is the pattern, and this is what the chairman was getting at. Minnesota, it was the same thing. Fraud on a huge scale. Somali American population involved in it. When they check it out, they call them racist. Only difference is in Ohio, they're actually doing something about it. 153 indictments, 110 convictions. In Minnesota, it was all the U.S. attorneys. It wasn't the state. They didn't do squat. And the reason they didn't do squat, we have the quote. This is a person who worked in the Attorney General's office in Minnesota. There was a perception that forcefully tackling this issue might cause political backlash among the Somali community, which is a core voting bloc. Politics stopped them in Minnesota. It's not stopping Mr. Faber, Mr. Davila from doing their work. The state senator wants to just criticize Republicans, even though the guy in the middle of all this is the Democrat state representative in the same darn building. Okay, did I get anything wrong in that assessment, Mr. Faber?
Congressman, Chairman, no.
All right, I appreciate it. With that, and I want to thank the chairman for his good work on this broad issue and what he's doing. Outstanding member of Congress, we appreciate that. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And I now recognize Mr. Walkinshaw from Virginia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Task Force on Defending Constitutional Rights and Exposing Institutional Abuses. I am really excited to be here. Suspending funds that Congress appropriated in violation of the Impoundment Control Act and the Constitution. Firing independent inspectors general to cover up their waste, fraud, and abuse. An unconstitutional executive order on birthright citizenship, plainly violating the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, defying a court order to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States, stripping a former CISA cybersecurity director of their security clearance in a clear act of political retaliation, altering federal employees' email to include partisan language, an act ruled illegal and unconstitutional, giving DOJ access to individuals' social security numbers and bank account numbers, illegally sharing federal agency data on outside servers, attempting to exempt DOJ from FOIA, illegally deploying the United States military inside the United States, using the Department of Justice to target perceived political enemies, taking place today as we speak, dismantling cyber and election security, violating the Emoluments Clause, and accepting billions of dollars in gifts from foreign leaders. These are just a few of the examples in which the Trump administration has violated the Constitution, abused institutions, disregarded the rule of law. I know that Chairman Gill has expressed his concerns about seeing Muslim families in malls in Dallas, but he and Mr. Jordan had no concerns with President Trump accepting a $400 million airplane from the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh.
What about all the money from Russia and China and Ukraine for the big guy? What about that? What about that? Everybody knew about the plane. I'm sure that Trump is accepting it in a legal way, otherwise he wouldn't announce it all over the media. But what about all that money for the big guy? Why isn't anybody talking about that? Why didn't anybody go to the big guy's home in Delaware and have a FBI raid for the big guy? Nobody's talking about that.
Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Muslim families in malls is a huge problem. $400 airplane from the Qatari sheikh, not a problem. Let's not forget the $1.8 billion slush fund they tried to ram through to pay off insurrectionists who attempted to overturn the results of a free and fair election, to pay off their buddies.
Anybody that thinks the 2020 election was free and fair just has their just has their head in the sand. And I could talk about this topic for hours because I saw it firsthand on election night, what was going on. Not to mention, what happened in 2020 continues to happen in some states. And we just saw it in LA with the mayoral race. Election day is called Election Day. It's not called Election Week. It's not called Election Month. We are living in 2026. We have more than enough resources where these elections can be tallied on Election Day. And then that's it. No more mysterious ballot drops and mail-in ballots that come in weeks later with no postmarks. That's not free and fair elections. And it's insane to me that anybody would think that 2020 turned out the way it was supposed to. But let's continue.
When President Trump was asked about the Constitution and whether he had a responsibility to uphold it, he said, "I don't know." Blatantly unconstitutional. That's a direct quote. That's not from me. That's Judge John Kogenauer, a Republican-appointed federal judge. Targeted deportation proceedings continue unconstitutionally to chill freedom of speech. Again, not me. Judge William Young, a Republican-appointed judge. The lust for unbridled power and the imposition of cruelty in its quest know no bounds and are bereft of human decency. That's District Judge Fred Berry. This task force should be doing everything in its power to prevent institutional abuses and protect the integrity of the United States Constitution. And there's a long list of things we could work on that are taking place right now as we speak. So if we're serious about our work here, we should direct it to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, because that's where the Constitution's being violated. That's where our institutions are being abused. Senator Antonio, Ohio saw a surge in ICE activity over the course of the last year as a result of the Trump administration's out-of-control mass deportation.
Okay, so I want to pause here because I was looking up that J6 slush fund that everyone has been talking about, because I had never heard of it until I listened to some of these hearings the last few days. Well, I take that back. I actually had heard of this fund. I just never heard anybody call it a J6 slush fund. So let me just set the record straight. So it is not a J6 slush fund, as the left would like you to believe. What it is It was a proposal by the Trump admin called the Anti-Weaponization Fund. It was announced in May 2026, and it was not created exclusively for J6 defendants. But many January 6 participants and their attorneys openly stated that they intended to seek compensation from it. So this was not exclusively created for J6ers by any means. So what the fund is, the U.S. Department of Justice announced a $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund as part of a settlement agreement resolving President Trump's lawsuit against the IRS over the leak of his tax return. So President Trump went after the IRS, they illegally released his tax returns, and they settled with him for close to $1.8 billion. The admin said that the purpose of the fund was to compensate Americans who had been harmed by what it described as political weaponization of government agencies. So again, this was a settlement that was reached between the Department of Justice, the IRS, and Trump. Trump could have kept all that money. He won, or he didn't win, but this was the settlement they came up with. But a part of that settlement, Donald Trump wanted to compensate people that have been targeted by the left, and that's what this money is about. So he described it as political weaponization of government agencies. According to Todd Blanche, applicants from any political background, though, could apply. So people are calling it the J6er Fund because the former Proud Boy chairman had talked about it, said that he's trying to seek out $2 to $5 million. And one of the attorneys, Peter Tickton, that has represented over 400 J6ers, made a statement that he was going to submit claims on their behalf. But by no means is this what they're saying it is. It was never created to be a slush fund for J6ers. It was created, really, anybody listening, if you feel like you've been weaponized by the justice system or unfairly targeted, you could apply to get compensation from this fund. So that's just not true what they're saying. It's just not true. But I love how they come up with like these creative names and then they just repeat them over and over and over. It's such propaganda. And I just think it's so wrong that they're in our house saying these lies. Let's continue.
Policies, often unconstitutional, by the way. Federal judges have said ICE violated the law, violated court orders more than 100 times. Can you just speak to the impact that these policies have had on your community?
Oh, but also important to note that the fund has been blocked. So a federal judge did block it. So you could apply, but for right now, nobody has gotten any compensation from this, which really sucks. Also, that he went to the trouble to negotiate this to help Americans who felt like they, had their lives ruined by our government and being persecuted for political reasons. And of course, like the left does, they're blocking it. All right, but let's continue.
There's a general state of fear in our local communities. Folks are afraid to attend everything from grocery stores to their children's schools, show up for court appearances where they're trying to follow the law, and everything in between, even show up for their faith communities. There is fear. There is a level of fear, and certainly they're unable to go to work.
Are the American citizens you represent confident that this administration will follow the Constitution, follow the law, and not abuse the institutions it controls? Are your constituents, who are American citizens, confident of those facts?
My constituents are watching and paying attention to what's going on both in our communities and across the country. There is a level of fear. There is not the faith that the federal policies and the policies that are coming from the administration at the federal level are there to protect them. They fear they're there to persecute and prosecute them.
Thank you. I yield back.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Walkinshaw. And before I turn it over to Mr. Biggs, I'd like to enter into the record two different things. First, a transcript from the March 4th, 2026 hearing on fraud and misuse of federal funds in Minnesota. Part 2, where Ms. Ansari said that it was, quote, outrageous that this fraud is what we are choosing to spend our time on the Oversight Committee. Secondly, I'd like to enter into the record this article from Cleveland.com, Medicaid fraud scheme in Ohio pushed in testimony at Senate hearing, where Ms. Antonio said, quote, I question whether it is real or not to begin with, referring to fraud. And without objection, those will be entered into the record. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Biggs from Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Senator Davila, you were asked if about 450,000 people had been ripped off of Medicaid in Ohio, if you were okay with that, and you said you thought that was a mischaracterization, and you were prohibited from expanding on that. I'd like you to answer that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Mr. Biggs. What I was going to say was a reaction to the comments from the ranking member toward the beginning, where she indicated that Americans are struggling to pay bills and a number of other things. And I just wanted to indicate that those challenges are exacerbated by the fraud that we're seeing in this system. And just to underscore the point that the people who are on Medicaid, age, blind, disabled, others who are qualified for the system under the eligibility requirements prescribed by federal law and at the state level, those are the people that we're looking out for. Every dollar that's being defrayed and diverted to go somewhere else in the way of waste, fraud, or abuse is a dollar that can't be used for someone on the system who legitimately can benefit from it.
Mr. Faber, you mentioned in your written statement that there were 164 public officials, you actually mentioned in your opening statement too, who your office has convicted for fraud. What kind of public officials are these? Are these elected officials or are they bureaucrats?
Both. We have criminal jurisdiction when somebody involved in government is lying, stealing, and cheating with government money. And so if it's a public official, I've convicted county sheriffs, I've convicted county commissioners, I've convicted transit authority directors. In fact, I'm the first auditor in state history to do a 4-day jury trial myself against a regional transit authority official who was stealing both federal and state dollars.
All right. And you mentioned in your statement that in March of 2024, you found that there were 124,000 individuals who were enrolled in Ohio's Medicaid program and at least one other state. And that you said, quote, now quote, Ohio paid managed care organizations more than $1 billion associated with these enrollees, close quote. Yeah. Is that an accurate statement? Are we talking $1 billion for 124,000 people that are multiple enrolled?
Correct. What happens is somebody, for whatever reason, is enrolled in multiple states. This is not a new problem. It is something the federal government and CMS knows about. It is a problem that Ohio has known about. We've identified it on at least 2 or 3 different occasions. And at one point, our former Medicaid director, who candidly did a lot to take down controls in the system and create some of the problems, essentially downplayed it. And despite us saying, okay, are these Medicaid managed care organizations somehow going to be held accountable for this? Let's get the money back. The answer historically has been, we're aware of the problem, and nothing to see here.
Yeah, we'll get to it later. We have the same problem in Arizona, billions of dollars of Medicaid fraud. I'm going to go next to you, Mr. Rosiak. So when you say the largest billing code is personal services for DHS, that's $140 billion. Over how long a period of time for that?
This is dating back to 2019-ish.
Okay, so 5-6 years, including COVID time?
Correct.
Okay. And please tell us about one building had 94 companies billing Medicaid more than $66 million. Tell us about that one building and what you found.
Sure. I think that The best way to encapsulate it, the auditor actually found 15% of all spending, home health care spending in the state of Ohio, went to 2 zip codes. And so when you're talking about all these buildings in one place and all these recipients in 2 zip codes, what it makes you think is, how is it that the residents of Northeast Columbus are so sick more than anybody else? And Ohio is a big state, and they've got people from all kinds of walks of life. You would assume that they would be encountering debilitating illnesses in their old age at roughly similar rates. And so the issue is when you see buildings with these concentrations, and 15% in 2 zip codes is crazy. And it gets to the idea that there are certain sub-communities in Ohio that are feigning illness or claiming to be eligible for this program that was intended to be for old ladies that are on the verge of death, and they're actually middle-aged and they're perfectly healthy.
You mentioned one lady in Massachusetts who stole $100 million by charging for non-existent home health care. Have we seen that in Ohio as well?
There have been, I believe it happens very commonly in Ohio, and there was a GPS rule that was supposed to make sure people actually were going, and that rule was actually removed. And so there's no way to prove they didn't actually go and visit these patients.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have several UCs I'd like to bring forward.
Okay.
Biden commutes sentences of 2 Illinois mega fraudsters.
Without objection.
North Dakota judge blasts Biden for setting fraudsters free.
Without objection.
Ohio Auditor of State Keith Farber's report electronic visit verification, November 2024.
Without objection.
Same author, Auditor Faber, how do you say that, Faber? Faber, Auditor Faber, cost of concurrent enrollment.
Without objection.
Analysis, Ohio rocked by fraud, now what?
Without objection.
Arizona nurse practitioner sentenced for role in Medicaid fraud scheme.
Without objection.
Minnesota Medicaid operators bankruptcy to riches rise, crashes into fraud probe.
Without objection.
DOJ, Azerbaijan national charged in $90 million California healthcare fraud scheme.
Without objection.
5 arrested in alleged $267 million hospice fraud scheme that exploited California's Medi-Cal system.
Without objection.
Hospice fraud uses stolen identities for fake patients.
Without objection.
RFK Jr. announces largest autism fraud bust in American history with $46.6 million Medicaid scheme indictment.
Without objection.
California man pleads guilty to orchestrating $270 million medication reimbursement fraud scheme.
Without objection.
And White House cuts $1.3 billion in Medicaid payments to California.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir. Yield back.
Mr. Chair, I have 2 UC requests, please.
Yep.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record April 4, 2025 article that KFF Health News titled Trump Health Fraud Focus at Odds with Past Pardons, which points to the hypocrisy in President Trump's pardoning convicted fraudsters. My second UC.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir. My second UC, it's from December 19th, 2025, article from the Washington Post entitled Trump's Pardon Wipes Out Payments to Defrauded Victims, which shows how our president lets criminals and fraudsters walk free so long as they donated to his campaign.
Without objection. Great. And now I'd like to recognize Representative Presley from Massachusetts for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today's hearing is the first one convened by the so-called task force on defending constitutional rights and exposing institutional abuses. And yet, we are ignoring the fact that Donald Trump is the single largest threat to our Constitution, and judges across our country have consistently ruled, in fact, that he has violated the law. And when it comes to institutional abuses, Trump created a $1.8 billion fund to directly send taxpayer dollars.
It's so annoying that they're bringing this up over and over and over. First of all, they're completely lying. They're all saying the same thing. It's all propaganda. That's number one. Number two, it was blocked. No money has been distributed to anybody, any J6er, any person that applied for this program. No money has ever been distributed whatsoever. So it is something that we should not even be talking about, especially when we're trying to discuss real fraud, real Medicaid fraud that actually happened. And they just keep bringing up stuff that never even happened. Oh, okay, let's talk about this to death because Donald Trump created this program that never took off. You can't bring that up as evidence. Evidence to what? That he had an idea, that the idea was agreed upon, but federal judges blocked it? Okay, you guys got your wish. You got your way. No money has ever been distributed. Shut up about it. Like, stop deflecting. But I think it's really interesting that they keep bringing this up, and it makes me think that there's something more going on, because as I've said the last week, the left confesses with their accusations. In my opinion, a lot of the things that they accuse the right of doing is stuff that they've already done or are currently doing. So again, let's pay attention to that. And for everybody out there, this is definitely a conversation I want to have later this week in the chat. Like, what's the left doing that they're so obsessed with this $1.8 billion fund that never came to fruition? What are they doing behind the scenes that they don't want you to look at? What kind of slush fund did they have set up that they don't want us to know about? That's why they're pointing this out. I'd love to hear everybody's opinion this week.
To his friends and political allies. That is what I call fraud. But Republicans want to ignore Trump's culpability, so let's discuss a federal government response to what is happening in Ohio. Mr. Faber, given your role as state auditor, when public funds are stolen, what do you consider to be meaningful accountability?
Chairman, Representative, essentially the question is what do you think needs to happen to people who are caught stealing, lying, cheating with government money, as we have done in 165 different cases? You hold them accountable. If it is convictable fraud, meaning a crime, you prosecute them and send them to prison. On the other hand, a lot of what we see, as I talked about earlier, as somebody who prosecutes fraudsters, is waste or abuse. And that is essentially a public policy question. You need to tighten the controls, tighten the eligibility, tighten the parameters of the program to limit waste and abuse. We lose more money in waste and abuse than we do in other areas. But fraud is certainly something, if you catch somebody who violates the law, you hold them accountable and you prosecute them. That's what I've done.
Okay, and I'll just say, yes, and in my opinion, accountability must also include restorative justice. So that means making communities whole. It means putting the stolen money back into programs that it was taken from, and sending a clear message that theft of public good, of public funds, simply does not pay. It is unacceptable. I don't feel that's the standard that's being modeled by Republicans. In today's hearing, we've seen and heard people castigate and attack caregivers who bathe our elders, who cook for disabled neighbors.
Nobody attacked any caregivers in this hearing. Not one Republican attacked a caregiver at all, said anything negative about somebody that was legitimately giving care to an old person. Nobody attacked them whatsoever. So, like, are these speeches just pre-written and it doesn't matter that none of this stuff has been said? And also, I would love to see the left give back money that they fraudulently used or wasted. I would love for the left to do that, but I don't think we're ever going to see that.
And keep families together in their homes. And so when it comes to holding bad actors accountable and helping victims, Trump and Republican sycophants seem to me to be deeply unserious. And that is a choice. It's a deliberate choice. Mr. Faber, do you believe that individuals, and this is a yes or no question, please, that individuals convicted of healthcare fraud should have to pay restitution, yes or no?
Absolutely. We have issued hundreds of millions of dollars of findings for recovery for restitutions, not just on convictions, but when we find somebody has violated the rules.
All right. And I'll just ask for the entire dais. Mr. Rosiak? Do you believe individuals convicted of healthcare fraud should have to pay restitution, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. And Representative Villa?
Yes.
And Senator Antonio?
Yes.
All right. So you agree, but you know who doesn't? Donald J. Trump. In fact, I want to ask a unanimous consent to enter into the record a June 2025 article from Truth Out titled "Trump Grants Clemency to Executive Who Orchestrated $250 million in Medicaid Fraud Scheme."
Without objection?
Now, look, I support using the clemency power to rectify injustices when the criminal legal system gets it wrong. But Donald Trump, with the support of Republicans in Congress, is using his authority to reward fraudsters, and he is doing so at the expense.
I don't believe her. I really don't believe her. And you have to keep in mind that for the last 4 years or so, when Biden was president, the Department of Justice and all of our three-letter agencies were absolutely weaponized against conservatives. And, you know, I could go through a whole list of different conservative groups and people that were specifically targeted and accused of very terrible crimes and had their lives turned upside down, but really didn't actually commit those crimes. And I don't know if I believe her. Haven't looked into the specific case that she's talking about, but more likely somebody was accused of something and there wasn't real evidence, and that's really what happened. It's really hard to defend yourself when you have these agencies going after you. It's really scary also. Last year there was a hearing in the Senate, and I remember Josh Hawley being in it, and I forgot the gentleman from Alaska, but he was talking about these raids that were going on in Alaska involving the EPA. So the EPA would go into a mechanic shop, for example, and the guys are just doing their thing, fixing the cars and the ships and whatever, and the EPA would come in to do an administrative check, but they raided them at gunpoint with long guns and bulletproof vests, and it's very scary. And these people didn't commit any crimes or anything. It's just administration stuff. So these are the types of things that the Biden admin did to people the last few years. Again, I'm not 100% sure about the case that she's talking about. I'm definitely going to research it after the stream, but I just really don't believe her.
Of victims of fraud. I published a report called Trump's Clemency Gap. It reveals how Trump has prioritized pardoning people who collectively defrauded the federal government of over $2 billion in taxpayer money. For example, in 2011, Florida resident Lawrence Duran, owner of American Therapeutic Corporation, was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison for orchestrating a $205 million Medicare fraud scheme involving false and fraudulent claims for mental health services. A federal judge ordered Duran to pay more than $87 million in restitution, which Trump wiped away. This task force should have a hearing about that. Senator Antonio, do you support Trump denying $87 million in restitution to victims when he commuted Lawrence Duran? Yes or no?
No.
Representative Villa?
It's not an issue I've looked at, and it's not relevant to this hearing.
I'm asking you now. So
It's
I
not
just like
germane
your
to this
opinion.
hearing, Congresswoman.
It's pretty clean. Do you support Trump denying $87 million in restitution to victims when he commuted Lawrence Duran? Yes or no?
Stand by the statement I've given you. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rosiak.
Same answer as Mr. Davila.
Well, I don't know. I guess I just have to take that as a no. Mr. Faber?
I'm not familiar with the facts. The short answer is the president has the clemency.
It was publicly reported, and I'm making you aware of it right now, so you could just
You're
just
not
tell
without me understanding both sides. Without the president's facts in the commutation, he has
There's
that
really
power
no
when
both
he can use
sides there.
somebody. It's his decision.
Okay.
Now, the fact is there are things that I disagreed with the Biden partners as well, but the
Fair
short
enough,
answer
but that also is not the subject of this hearing, so that's not germane. But this is, and we should be having a hearing about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Presley. And now I'd like to recognize the great Brian Jack for 5 minutes.
Well, first, Mr. Chairman, I open my time by congratulating you. For those watching at home, this hearing is a direct byproduct of the meritocracy of the House Republican Conference. Chairman Gill and I are members of the 119th Congress's freshman class, and though just a freshman, Chairman Gill distinguished himself over the past 17 months as one of the best investigators and worst enemies of waste, fraud, and abuse. Chairman Comer and many others across our conference recognized that leadership and specifically created a task force to expose the institutional abuses and fraud across our government, and he appointed a freshman, Chairman Gill, as its chairman of this task force. So I congratulate you, Mr. Chairman, on this first hearing and also the meritocracy of the Republican majority in Congress. I'd like to start, if I could, with Mr. Faber. We represent similar states. Georgia is my home state. I represent the 3rd District of Georgia, and our states have similar economies, similar populations. I would say similar football, but we've seen in recent years that's not necessarily the case. But I would ask you, if you could, to help personify to my constituents who may be watching at home just what the impact is. If you could try to estimate for the average Ohioan the waste, fraud, and abuse that you have to battle with every day, what is the cost to the average Ohioan for that?
It is real money. As I always say, Bob and Betty Buckeye don't care whether the money comes out of their front pocket, their back pocket, their left pocket, or their right pocket. If somebody is stealing their money, whether it's state money, local money, or federal money, it's their money. And so as they're trying to pay for gas, as they're trying to pay for health care, as they're trying to pay for food on their table, they take anybody who is ill-gotten in their gains seriously. In this regard, one of the things I've identified isn't just Medicaid fraud, it's unemployment fraud during the pandemic. I can put that in real money. In Ohio, we could say roughly $6 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse occurred in the pandemic unemployment system. That is the equivalent of $2,000 for each and every Ohio employee, everybody who works in Ohio. If I took Medicaid into the system, and if we assume Medicaid is a similar number, roughly between $4 and $6 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse, you can equivalent that to about $2,000 for every Ohio employee. That's real money. It's money that people are paying in state taxes. It's money that they're paying in local taxes. It's money that certainly they're paying in federal taxes. And in that regard, this means a lot to your constituents, just like it means a lot to Bob and Betty Buckeye. They expect government to work. And when you have weaknesses in controls and programs that are designed to put more people on the rolls without ever asking the question, do you really need these services, that ultimately you're going to have less faith in the system. And that's what we see through the things that we've been identifying.
Thank you, Auditor. Mr. Rosiak, I want to congratulate you on your reporting. You've done a great service to your country, and people are going to be reading your reporting for many years to come. But I'm curious, as we wrap up this task force today, this hearing, what are some of the themes you've seen across the country? I mean, are there specific pockets of the country where you see this institutional abuse, or what themes have you seen in your reporting and your investigative work?
One of the things that I think is important for Congress to grapple with is that this is almost entirely among foreign-born people. At least the part that I saw in Columbus, it was primarily Bhutanese people and Somalian, to some extent from Ghana and Sierra Leone. But some of this is being used systematically by refugees to bring money back to their home countries. And so Congress created this program as medical aids, and there are people that are turning it into foreign aid. And if Congress wants to send money to Bhutan, it needs to do that above board. There is one family with the name Adki Hari, that's a Bhutanese name, that's been paid $350 million over the last several years just from Medicaid in Ohio alone. So that's just one state, just one Bhutanese name. That's $350 million in Medicaid. That's 1/10 of the GDP of Bhutan. And what I found is that all of the Bhutanese advocacy organizations and charities are tied to, sometimes share an address with, home health care companies. And they're taking that money from Medicaid and then sending it even to fund public school systems in foreign countries.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that family, and with the 30 seconds left, I want you to share to this committee, this task force, and the people watching at home, some of the lavish lifestyle that was promoted by that family. They posted a lot on social media. Could you share with us some of the things you found in your reporting?
Drinking champagne on private jets, private yachts, wearing Prada clothes, giving birthday gifts of Range Rovers and Escalades.
So to everyone watching at home, those are your tax dollars that went to this family that fraudulently defrauded you, the American people, and your home and your families of the resources that you deserve. So, Mr. Chairman, I congratulate you again on the first hearing of this task force, and I congratulate our witnesses. Thank you for helping us do a better job serving the American people. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes for the purpose of asking questions. Mr. Rosiak and all the witnesses, thank you all again for coming here. Mr. Rosiak, you've identified multiple individuals and LLCs that you believe engaged in fraud. How many of these had Somali or Bhutanese or other African origin names?
100%.
100%. And how many did you look through? I mean, that's 100% of how many, roughly?
I looked at the names of hundreds of companies. I looked more deeply into maybe 50.
More deeply into 50. You looked into hundreds of companies, and 100%, you're telling me, had names that were Somali, Bhutanese, or other sort of African origin derivation.
Correct. I thought I saw an American, and I was very excited, but it turned out to be the teenage son of that money launderer who was actually just a proxy for this woman from Ghana.
What are some of these names that you come across? Do you hear the same names, or are they different names?
Yeah, it's funny because this started off, I was investigating a guy named Robert Achiapong, and then I found a different scammer named Roberta Achiapong, and I thought they were related, but they weren't. It's just, that's how common it is to scam Medicaid when your name is Achiapong. And then I did the same thing with a guy named Aliu Conte, who has 30 criminal charges in Cuyahoga County, or in Franklin County, and threatened my family, malicious wounding, crazy stuff. This guy's a career criminal. And then there was a different guy named Alfred Conte, who was convicted of Medicaid fraud, but Ohio, Franklin County expunged his record. They let him plead down, and then they expunged his record. He didn't have to pay any money back except like $500. And the Ohio Nursing Board let him keep his license. So you've got the Contes, the Achiapongs, and it just seems to be the family business is billing Medicaid.
Criminal rings. We did a lot of work previously this year on Medicaid fraud in Minnesota. There seem to be a lot of similarities here. Can you tell us in your investigation, have you found any connections between Ohio Medicaid fraud and the Somali fraud that we saw in Minnesota?
Yeah, it's the same people. They all have relatives in both places, and they move back and forth. First of all, I think there was $130 million in cash that transferred from the Columbus airport to the Minnesota airport and then to Somalia. And so they're moving basically briefcases of cash. And there's one guy that had, basically he racked up $30,000 in tax debts in Columbus running this daycare center and not paying his taxes. So then he started a home health care company in Minnesota, billed $35,000 in 1 month, and then dissolved the company.
So I just want to be clear, your testimony is that there is a large interstate criminal enterprise of Somali fraudsters that are defrauding the federal government in multiple states of potentially billions of dollars. Is that your testimony?
Correct.
And can you give us a sense of the scale of this fraud? We saw it in Minnesota, we're seeing it here, but have you seen it in other places, or can you give us a sense for either dollar values or the number of people involved, in your opinion?
There's thousands of people involved. I would say the majority of Bhutanese people are either on Medicaid home health care or are providing Medicaid home health care services. They had recently 15,000 people. This nonprofit group, this advocacy group, which is tied to actually founded by a home health care guy. They had 15,000 Bhutanese people come to this party in Ohio, and they'd bust in all the participants on their Medicaid vans because everybody there has their own Medicaid company. And so I think Bhutanese people are systematically using Medicaid, not only in Ohio, but also in Pennsylvania and Kentucky and New York and in other states where they perceive that they will pay the family member and they will pay for non-nursing services, and those are the two big vulnerabilities.
So it's not just the Somalis, it's also Bhutanese, it's across multiple states. They're coordinating with each other. There's a network of foreigners running criminal fraud rings within our government, within our country, I should say, defrauding our federal government. Thank you so much for the work that you have done on this. It's been fantastic reporting, so we really appreciate this. Senator Antonio, thank you for being here. Has Somali immigration been good for Ohio?
You know, that's really outside of my purview of
You're a state senator. Would you like to see more immigration from Somalia?
As far as I'm processing your question, and I have to say that I I was almost brought to tears just now.
72%
because
of Somali immigrants are on
rate
welfare.
and the level of hateful rhetoric
You're
based on
defrauding your
false
state at an
information.
astounding.
There has been no hate or negative rhetoric. Are we watching the same hearing, guys? Like, please tell me in the comments, like, am I missing something? I have not heard anybody say anything hateful whatsoever. They're talking about facts. They're pointing out that these people are from foreign countries and, you know, these are the steps that they're taking. But I have not heard any of the Republican congressmen say anything negative, or the journalists. I did not hear him say anything negative, any hate rhetoric. Was it hate rhetoric that he pointed out that this one family was on social media drinking champagne, you know, photographing themselves on yachts, giving each other Range Rovers for their birthday? Is that hate speech now, guys? Like, I think I'm missing something, or I'm just not living in the same reality as these people. It's so confusing for me. Please, if I'm missing something, let me know.
Right, and I think
Shocking.
that most Ohioans
It's
would have a
shocking
problem
to me.
with that.
The lack of even humanity to
I
group
think it's
a group of
inhumane to allow
people
your own
together.
state to be defrauded
I am
at
shocked.
astounding
I
rates.
am shocked.
Nowhere did anybody say or shame any legitimate person that needs Medicaid benefits. That was never said in this hearing. Like, I hate this crap. I hate this dumb propaganda where they just villainize the right and just make up things. Like, nobody said that. Nobody said anything hateful whatsoever. I'm so sorry that truth and facts is so offensive to the left.
Millions of
appalled
dollars
by the
taken out of the
behavior
pockets
here
of
right
working
now.
class people
I am
going to
shocked.
criminal fraudsters.
Because
I certainly
in
have
every,
a major problem
in every
with that.
community,
I think
there
that
are
that's an
good
issue, and I think
people
most
and there are
Americans
bad
agree.
people.
Chair, regular
Nobody's
order.
doing what
What
they're
you
Good
try
people.
to
Understand we're not
say
supposed to
Bad
disrespect.
people.
We're not supposed to
And
disrespect
with
our
that
witnesses.
said, we are out of
Member of
time,
a
Ms.
group
Antonio.
We're not
is
supposed to
somehow a
We've already gone
criminal
over here.
is shocking to me. I am shocked and
We're
appalled.
already out of time here. That said, thank you to the witnesses for taking the time to come here. It's always fun on the Oversight Committee, always exciting. In closing, I want to formally thank you guys for your testimony today. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there's no further business, without objection, the task force stands adjourned.
Well, YouTube family, thank you so much for joining me today on this lovely Monday night to finish up this hearing about Ohio Medicaid fraud. I will see you back later this week, and I hope everybody has a great night.